Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. We like to dig into all kinds of interesting topics here to help you become a better communicator. I'm Mike, and today we're going to go deep on a skill that's absolutely essential, I would say, in life, listening and understanding. And to help us navigate this topic, we have an expert in communication with us. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. And you're definitely right about how important listening is, especially in a world that never seems to stop throwing information at us.
It really does feel like a superpower sometimes to cut through all that noise and truly connect with what somebody's actually saying. So, Sarah, let's just start with the basics here. Why is listening such a big deal? Why should we be dedicating a whole deep dive to it?
We often focus on the speaking part when we think about communication, getting our own ideas out there. But to have effective communication, you need to build a bridge between people. And that bridge is built with genuine listening. It's a two-way street.
I really like that image, a bridge of understanding. So how do we start to build this bridge? Where do we even begin?
Well, the first step might seem surprisingly simple, but it's really the foundation. Being present and engaged, that means giving the speaker your full attention.
That's harder than it sounds these days, right? Our phones are always buzzing. There's always something trying to grab our attention.
It is, absolutely. And that's why it's even more important to consciously choose to be present. Put the phone away, silence the notifications, truly focus on the person right there in front of you.
So no more sneaking peeks at social media while someone's trying to have like a real conversation.
Well, if you want to build that bridge, yeah, definitely not. Eye contact, a genuine smile, attentive body language. All of these things tell the speaker, hey, what you're saying matters to me.
Like saying, I see you. I'm here with you in this moment. Those nonverbal cues, they carry so much weight.
For sure. But it goes even beyond just the physical being there. You have to be mentally present, too. Quiet all those mental distractions, the to-do list, that song that's stuck in your head, and really tune in to what the speaker is trying to convey.
Okay, so step one, be present, be engaged. No multitasking, no mental wandering. Got it. What's next in becoming like a master listener?
Well, now we go beyond simply hearing the words to really grasping their meaning. And step two is all about active listening.
Active listening. Okay, so that seems like it's more than just sitting there nodding along. So what does that actually involve?
You're right. It's about actively participating in the conversation. It's showing the speaker that you're not just hearing them, but you're making a real effort to understand.
So how do we actively participate in this way? Like, what are some tools we can actually use?
One powerful technique is paraphrasing. So after the speaker shares something, try putting it back into your own words to make sure you're both on the same page. It helps clear up any confusion and reassures the speaker that you're really trying to get their message.
Like say, okay, so let me make sure I'm on the same page, and then reflecting back what you've understood.
Exactly. It shows you're actively processing the information, not just letting it go in one ear and out the other. Another key part of active listening is asking open-ended questions. Instead of just yes or no questions, ask questions that encourage the speaker to, elaborate, share more of their thoughts and feelings.
So instead of like, are you upset about this? We might say, tell me more about how the situation is making you feel.
Exactly. Open-ended questions invite a much deeper conversation, and they demonstrate a genuine interest in the speaker's perspective.
This makes a lot of sense. But what about those times when we're listening and maybe we completely disagree with what's being said? How do we actively listen without just, biting our tongue?
That's a really important point. Active listening doesn't mean you have to agree with everything the speaker is saying. It's about understanding their perspective, even if it's different from your own. And remember, sometimes understanding is the first step toward finding common ground or having a productive conversation about those different viewpoints.
So even when it's tough, active listening is key. Be present. Ask open-ended questions. Try to see things from their side. Okay, so what's the final step to really becoming a master of this whole listening and understanding thing?
Well, the final step pulls it all together. It's about responding thoughtfully and constructively. And this means taking what you've heard and crafting a response that shows you've been engaged and adds something valuable to the conversation.
So it's not about just like blurting out the first thing that pops into our head, right? What does the thoughtful response actually look like?
You're exactly right. A thoughtful response acknowledges the speaker's message and validates their feelings. It shows you are truly listening. You might start by saying, I hear what you're saying, or I understand this is frustrating for you.
So it's not just about giving our own opinion. It's showing that we've taken in what the other person has shared.
Yes. From there, you can share your own perspective, ask for clarification, maybe even suggest solutions if that's appropriate. But the key is to do it respectfully, constructively, and in a way that moves the conversation forward.
It's like building on that foundation of understanding we've created through being present and listening actively.
That's a great way to put it. And remember, the tone we use and the language we choose in our response can make all the difference. We want to create a sense of openness where everyone feels heard and respected.
So we've got our 3 steps: being present, active listening, and thoughtful responses. But let's be real for a second. We all have moments where we hit roadblocks in our listening. What are some of those common barriers?
Well, one of the biggest culprits is distractions.
Oh, those pesky distractions. Whether it's our phone, a noisy environment, or even our own thoughts, they can totally derail our focus.
Absolutely. And it's not just external distractions. Internal ones can be just as bad. You know, when you're supposed to be listening, but you're mentally writing your grocery list or replaying that awkward encounter from earlier.
Ugh, totally guilty of that.
Yeah.
So how do we actually combat those distractions and stay truly present?
Well, for external distractions, sometimes it's as simple as politely asking for a quieter space or silencing our phones. But for internal distractions, mindfulness can be a powerful tool.
Mindfulness. Very zen. But how do we actually apply that to listening?
It's about gently guiding your attention back to the present moment, back to the speaker whenever you find your mind wandering. You know, notice the distracting thought, acknowledge it, then gently refocus on the person you're with. And honestly, it gets easier with practice.
It's like strength training for our attention spans.
I like that. Another barrier we often encounter is our own preconceived notions and biases. We all have them shaped by our experiences, upbringing, and beliefs.
So we might unintentionally filter what we hear through these lenses, interpreting their words based on our own assumptions rather than truly listening with an open mind.
Exactly. It's like we're wearing these tinted glasses that color everything we see. And when we're not aware of these biases, they can prevent us from fully understanding the speaker's point of view.
That's a great question. How do we take those tinted glasses off and see things more clearly?
It starts with self-awareness. Recognizing our own biases is the first step toward lessening their impact on our listening. Then it's about consciously striving to keep an open mind, to approach each conversation with curiosity and a willingness to learn.
It sounds like challenging ourselves to see beyond our own limited perspectives and really embrace the possibility of new understanding.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And sometimes those biases might even be positive. We might have a bias towards someone we admire, and that could make us miss important nuances in what they're communicating. So awareness is key, no matter what kind of bias it is.
So we've got distractions and biases to watch out for. What other listening barriers should we be aware of?
Well, sometimes our own emotions can actually get in the way. Think about a time when you were really angry or upset. Were you truly able to listen and understand someone else's perspective in that moment?
Probably not. When we're caught up in our own emotions, it can be really tough to be fully present and open to what other people are saying.
It is. And it's not just negative emotions either. Even excitement or anticipation can make it harder to truly listen. So being aware of our emotional state and how it might be influencing our listening is really important.
So if we're feeling overwhelmed by emotion, it might be wise to take a break before having a conversation that requires us to really listen deeply.
That's an excellent suggestion. Sometimes taking a few moments to breathe, center ourselves, and manage our emotions can make all the difference in our ability to listen with clarity and empathy. So we've talked about distractions, biases, and emotions. Are there any other common pitfalls to watch out for?
This is all so insightful. What other challenges do we face in becoming expert listeners?
Sometimes it just comes down to a lack of genuine interest in what the speaker is saying. We've all been in those conversations where our minds wander and we find ourselves nodding politely while our thoughts are miles away.
Yeah, totally. It's like our inner monologue takes over and we're not really present anymore.
Yeah, you got it. While we can't be fascinated by every topic or person we encounter, there are ways to cultivate a more engaged listening mindset even when we're not naturally drawn to the subject matter.
How can we train ourselves to be more interested even when the topic isn't our favorite? That feels like a real skill.
One strategy is to actively look for something valuable in what the speaker is saying. Maybe it's a bit of wisdom, a new perspective, or even just learning something new about the person. Even if we don't agree with everything, there's always something to be gained from actively listening to someone else's point of view.
It's about approaching the conversation as an opportunity for discovery rather than just a passive exchange of words.
I love that. And, you know, even if the topic isn't that captivating, We can always choose to be interested in this speaker as a person. Everyone has a story, experiences to share, and unique perspectives to offer.
So it's about shifting our focus from the content to the connection we're making.
Exactly. And that shift can make all the difference in our ability to listen with genuine interest and empathy.
We've covered distractions, biases, emotions, and staying interested. Are there any other traps we should be aware of in our journey to become better listeners?
One final pitfall I want to mention is the tendency to interrupt or dominate the conversation. It's easy to get caught up in our own thoughts and, be eager to share. But remember, effective listening is about creating space for the speaker.
Resisting that urge to jump in with our own opinions or solutions before we've truly understood their experience.
Exactly. Interrupting or dominating the conversation can send the message that we're more interested in hearing ourselves talk than in truly understanding the other person.
It can make them feel unheard and like their perspective doesn't matter.
Right. And that can damage relationships and hinder effective communication. So it's essential to practice patience, let the speaker finish, and resist the urge to constantly interject.
So it's about cultivating a listening mindset that prioritizes understanding over being right or getting our point across.
Perfectly said. Even when we disagree, there's always value in listening with an open mind and seeking to understand their perspective before offering our own rebuttal.
Sarah, this has been so insightful. We've uncovered so many barriers, from distractions and biases to emotions and the tendency to dominate the conversation. But there's one key element that seems to kind of weave through every aspect of effective listening: empathy.
You're absolutely right. Empathy is at the heart of listening and understanding. It allows us to connect on a deeper level, to move beyond just hearing words to experiencing genuine human connection.
Empathy. The ability to step into someone else's shoes, to see the world through their eyes and to understand their experience. Is that something we're born with, or can we develop it?
Well, while some people might naturally be more empathetic than others, it's definitely a skill that can be developed and strengthened with conscious effort.
That's great to hear. What are some practical steps we can take to boost our empathy and become more compassionate listeners?
It all starts with that active listening that we were just talking about. Really focusing on the speaker, paying attention to their words, their tone of voice, their body language. Those are all crucial ingredients for empathy.
It's like we're gathering clues to kind of understand their inner world, to see things from their perspective.
Exactly. And beyond just listening, we can actively cultivate empathy by asking those open-ended questions that encourage the speaker to share more about how they feel and what they've experienced. So instead of just asking, "How are you?" we might ask, "What's been happening in your world lately?"
Yeah, those open-ended questions, they create space for a much richer conversation, don't they?
They do. And it's not just about asking questions. It's about truly listening to the answers with an open heart. And sometimes simply reflecting back what we've heard can be really powerful. We might say something like, "It sounds like you're feeling really overwhelmed right now," or,
Yeah.
"I can imagine how frustrating that must have been."
Those reflections really validate their experience, which can be really comforting.
Right. And remember, empathy doesn't mean we have to agree with the speaker or condone their actions. We can still empathize with how they feel, even if we don't agree with the choices they've made.
So it's about separating the person from their actions, understanding that we can care about someone without endorsing everything they do.
Absolutely. That nuanced understanding is at the heart of true empathy. Now, while we've been focusing on verbal communication, remember that a huge part of understanding someone comes from their nonverbal cues as well.
Oh, that's right. Things like body language, facial expressions, even just the way someone holds themselves can tell us so much.
It can. Someone might be saying they're fine, but their slumped shoulders and downcast eyes tell a different story. So as listeners, we need to pay attention to those nonverbal signals. They can often reveal more than words alone.
So how do we learn to interpret those nonverbal cues? It feels like it could be easy to misinterpret things.
It definitely takes practice. It's about being observant and considering the context of the conversation. For example, crossed arms might signal defensiveness in one situation, but simply feeling cold in another. It's about looking at the whole picture, not just isolated gestures.
And I imagine it's also helpful to just check in with the speaker. If we're unsure, something like, "I'm sensing some hesitation in your voice." Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, exactly. It's always better to clarify than to assume. Checking in shows the speaker that you're truly paying attention and that you care about understanding them fully.
This is also fascinating. It seems like empathy is key, not only to being a better listener, but to navigating relationships and communication as a whole.
You're absolutely right. Empathy is essential in all types of relationships, whether it's with our partners, families, friends, colleagues, or even strangers. It's kind of the glue that holds our social fabric together.
In romantic relationships, I imagine empathy allows us to understand our partner's needs and desires, to support them through difficulties and to build a deeper connection.
Yes, absolutely. It's about moving beyond our own ego and really seeing and valuing our partner's experience. And then in family relationships, empathy helps us navigate those sometimes complex dynamics, understanding our parents, siblings, and children from their unique perspectives.
It feels like it could be a really powerful tool to overcome those generational misunderstandings and conflicts that can sometimes come up in families.
You're spot on. And in friendships, empathy lets us be there for our friends, celebrate their wins, and offer a listening ear when they're struggling.
Being that safe space where they can be themselves without judgment.
Yes. And even in the workplace, empathy is important for building trust, working together effectively, and creating a more positive environment. It helps us understand our colleagues handle disagreements better and build stronger relationships with clients.
So it's not just a nice to have in low case, it's actually a key ingredient for success in all areas of life.
Right. It's a win-win for everyone. Now, with all the amazing benefits of empathy, are there any potential downsides or challenges we should be aware of?
That's a great question. It seems like with any powerful tool, there's always a potential for misuse or unintended consequences. So what are some things to keep in mind?
You're exactly right. One challenge is what's called empathy fatigue.
Empathy fatigue.
Yeah.
That sounds almost counterintuitive. What does that mean?
Well, it's a state of emotional exhaustion that can happen when we're constantly exposed to other people's suffering or negativity. Think about healthcare workers, therapists, social workers. People who are constantly taking on the emotional burdens of others.
Like their reserves of empathy get depleted, leaving them feeling drained and overwhelmed.
Exactly. And while most of us aren't facing that level of emotional intensity day to day, we can all experience empathy fatigue to some degree, especially if we're surrounded by negativity or constantly consuming distressing news and social media.
So it sounds like it's important to be mindful of our own emotional health and to set boundaries when it comes to absorbing other people's emotions.
Yes, self-care is essential. We can't pour from an empty cup. Taking care of our own emotional needs allows us to be more present and empathetic when we choose to be.
It's about finding that balance between being compassionate and protecting our own well-being.
That's it. Another potential challenge with empathy is the risk of becoming overly involved in other people's issues.
That makes sense. We might try to fix everyone's problems or take on their emotional baggage as our own.
Yes. And while wanting to help those we care about is natural, it's important to remember that we're not responsible for solving everyone's problems or carrying their emotional weight.
So how do we strike that balance between being supportive and setting healthy boundaries?
It's about recognizing that our role is to listen, understand, and offer support, but not to take ownership of their challenges. We can be a compassionate presence without becoming entangled in their problems.
Offering empathy without enabling unhealthy patterns or becoming too emotionally invested.
You got it. Sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do is encourage someone to seek professional help or to establish boundaries that protect our own well-being.
Empathy is a powerful force, but it's important to use it wisely and to recognize our own limitations. It's amazing to think about the impact it can have on our relationships and our lives.
Absolutely. Empathy is the foundation for building trust, fostering connection, and creating a more compassionate and understanding world. It's a gift we can give ourselves and others, and it's one that keeps on giving.
This has been an incredible conversation, Sarah. We've really explored the art of listening and understanding from so many angles, from being present and practicing active listening to overcoming those common barriers and cultivating empathy. As we wrap up, what's one final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think the most important takeaway is that listening and understanding are choices. Every day we have the opportunity to choose to be present, to choose to listen with an open heart, and to choose to cultivate empathy in our interactions. And those choices have the power to transform our relationships, our work, and our lives in profound ways.
Beautifully said. It's a powerful reminder that we have the power to create more meaningful connections by simply choosing to be more present and empathetic listeners.
Yeah.
What's particularly interesting to me is how that extends beyond our personal lives. How does empathy play out in a broader kind of societal context?
Yeah, that's a really fascinating area to consider, isn't it? It's like those individual acts of empathy, they don't just stay contained, they actually ripple outward, influencing our communities, organizations, even global dynamics.
So when we practice empathy in our own lives, it can actually contribute to creating a more understanding and compassionate world around us.
It really can. Think about it for a second. When people in a community are more empathetic, they're more likely to have productive conversations to bridge those divides and to work together to actually solve those shared problems.
It's like empathy becomes this essential ingredient in building a more harmonious society.
Exactly. And this extends beyond just our local communities, too. When our leaders, when those decision makers approach challenges with empathy, they're more likely to consider everyone's needs. They're more likely to find solutions that are fair and create policies that actually benefit everyone.
So empathy isn't just this nice, warm, fuzzy feeling. It's a crucial component in creating a more just and equitable society for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. And then on a global scale, empathy is vital in promoting peace and understanding between nations. When we can step outside of our own little cultural bubbles and try to truly understand the experiences and perspectives of those who are different from us, we're less likely to give in to prejudice and fear and conflict.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity, regardless of nationality, ethnicity, religion, or any other arbitrary dividing line.
Exactly. Empathy is the antidote to those us versus them mentalities that so often lead to division and strife. It allows us to see beyond those artificial boundaries and recognize that we're all interconnected, that our well-being is intertwined.
It's inspiring to think that even the smallest acts of empathy can have a ripple effect that reaches far beyond our immediate circle.
They really can. And those ripples of empathy, they can create waves of change, transforming our world into a more compassionate, just, and peaceful place.
This has been a really incredible deep dive, Sarah. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
It's been my pleasure, Mike. Thanks for having me.
And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this journey of discovery. We hope you've learned some valuable tools and insights that'll help you become more effective listeners and better communicators.
And remember, this is just the beginning. Keep practicing those listening skills, keep cultivating empathy, and keep choosing to connect with others on a deeper level.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into the art of listening and understanding, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the Learn English Lab YouTube channel for more fascinating deep dives into all sorts of interesting topics.
Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep connecting.